TV7 Israel News is made possible thanks to your generous donation. Shalom Ve'erev Tov, good evening. Welcome to our daily TV7 Israel News Bulletin broadcast from Jerusalem. The United States launches Operation Economic Outcast, aimed at collapsing Iran's economy. The Ayatollah regime defiantly claims it has a plan to survive 2 years of economic isolation. And Israel warmly welcomes the Trump administration's economic measures against the Ayatollah regime in Iran. The United States has announced the launch of Operation Economic Outcast, a move Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised as just, as it is expected to, quote, exact a steep price from that cruel dictatorship and from those who assist its continued aggression. U.S. Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent held a special press conference announcing the operation, which was previously labeled as an economic D-Day.
Our great armed forces have laid the groundwork for achieving the President's objective of preventing Iran from ever obtaining nuclear weapons. They have shown America's resolve to finally end this threat. And the strength of America's economy under President Trump allows us to wage this sustained financial operation alongside the might of our military. Iran now faces a very clear choice, with only two paths before them: complete global isolation and a subsistence economy, or a path back to normalcy with an opportunity to rejoin the global economy. Today, we are launching Operation Economic Outcast to foreclose every other option available to the Iranian regime.
Secretary Bessent continued by highlighting his department's mapping of every node, every facilitator, and every network that Iran has used to smuggle oil and evade sanctions.
Treasury has mapped every node, every facilitator, and every network that Iran has used to smuggle oil and evade sanctions. Beginning today, the actions of Treasury and other agencies will tighten the noose and block every potential source of revenue that funds the IRGC and the evil Iranian regime. We are enforcing a zero-leakage approach. There will be no minimal breathing space for the regime to rebuild its capacity to inflict terror against America and the world. The final refuge of this regime is the mistaken conclusion of nations that still finance the Iranian threat in the hopes of evading it. It is no longer acceptable to operate in the gray spaces of this conflict. Countries cannot claim they are blind to enabling this activity.
Secretary Bessent further highlighted the role of the Ayatollah regime's facilitators, which have effectively helped the terrorists of Tehran survive to date.
Iran's enablers purchase, transport its petroleum. They facilitate the flow of its finances through exchange houses and free trade zones. They welcome Iran's flights and maintain registries on its behalf. They turn a blind eye to seaborne fuel transfers and overland transits. They condone illicit use of their banks, all the while concealing the extent of their complicity. The President is making phone calls to world leaders with specific requests to cease their interactions with the regime. We are already seeing results.
It is important to point out that China and Russia, which are two of Iran's major facilitators, have already announced their refusal to comply with America's new sanctions regime.
China has repeatedly made clear its firm opposition to illegal unilateral sanctions that lack international law basis and are not authorized by the UN Security Council. Economic warfare and maximum pressure do no help in resolving problems. They will only further fuel conflicts, trigger risk spillovers, disrupt global economic and financial order, and impair the rights and interests of other countries. The top priority is to de-escalate the situation and return to the track of dialogue and negotiation at an early date. China will take all necessary measures to resolutely safeguard its own legitimate rights and interests.
Two additional major facilitators of the Ayatollah regime, to include Turkey and Qatar, have thus far refrained from directly stating whether they would or would not adhere to the American sanctions regime, while the latter did insinuate its refusal to support the United States, insisting that the only path forward, from Doha's perspective that is to engage in diplomacy that essentially includes America's surrender to Iranian diktats.
These are unilateral sanctions. They are not UN sanctions. They are not, multilateral sanctions, and therefore, the question is to be asked of those who decided to impose these sanctions. For us, our priority was always reaching a diplomatic solution through talks. We are urging the parties to engage fully in the talks and the mediation that is led by Qatar and Pakistan and the other regional players, and we find that to be the only way out of this crisis, and we are encouraging again all the parties to engage in good faith.
In contrast to Qatar, the United Arab Emirates had announced mid-August that it was suspending all trade, commercial exchanges, and financial transactions with Iran, a move it had announced immediately after the RGC launched two ballistic missiles towards its territory. Meanwhile, in a Q&A session following his press conference, Secretary Bessent emphasized that while he is not going to name the countries the United States is talking with, these countries are fully aware of the timeline expected for them to end all economic contacts with the Ayatollah regime in Iran.
We want to make clear here today that no one is above the reach of U.S. sanctions, that if they facilitate transactions and are part of the ecosystem that turns Iranian oil into money, into repression, they will be targeted. We find that the best way to engage with countries is through quiet diplomacy, and we are level setting with every country to tell them our expectations. We know who they are, they know who they are, so when the hammer of U.S. Treasury actions falls upon them, they will have no one to blame but themselves. I'm not going to name names, that we've already seen some results, and that I am confident the President, as you all know, is quite persuasive, and we are following his calls up with calls from visits and calls from the State Department and from the U.S. Treasury, expecting them, or telling the leaders, the countries, and the entities exactly what we expect and the timelines. And I would expect that very quickly, if they do not respond, then you will see the ramifications of their actions.
Can you say how far the timelines are?
Again, I'm not going to set timelines, but we do not have infinite patience here.
Elsewhere in Washington, U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth was asked about the military dimension to activities against the Ayatollah regime in Iran.
Is it fair to say kinetic strikes are on a pause right now, or do you?
No. If we need to use kinetic strikes, we'll use them. If Iran is foolish enough to overplay their hand or mess with the American military, we'll do what we need to do. But economic pressure, we know, hurts them the most right now. But by no means are we foreclosing using kinetic strikes anywhere in the Strait of Hormuz or around Iran.
Meanwhile, in Tehran, the Iranian finance minister insisted that the Ayatollah regime has a 2-year plan to sustain the American onslaught against its economy.
They have made every effort during this period. They have tried to test the resolve of the Iranian people and the country's officials, and they have failed every time. Apparently, they have now decided to try another failure. We have long been expecting these days and were well aware of the plans they had. The government has a 2-year plan and is fully prepared, and has been prepared for these developments.
Finance Minister Madanizadeh went on to claim that the age of a unipolar order has come to an end and that while Iran had thus far only acted in self-defense, as he claims, it intends now to go on the offensive.
Naturally, they want to wage economic terrorism against us, and we have our own tools as well. We know how to play this game. This time, they should not think our response will be purely defensive and that we will only defend ourselves. They should also expect us to go on the offensive. The era of a unipolar world is over. As you have seen, 2 of the world's major countries rejected these new sanctions and this new plan, and refused to go along with them. We are almost certain that many other countries, whether officially or unofficially, will also refuse to accept them, and, Allah willing, they will fail.
It is worth noting that while the terror regime in Iran has failed to follow through on its threats, its proxy, Ansar Allah, which is dominated by the Houthi tribe in Yemen, has stepped up attacks against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and freedom of navigation in the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb.
The Yemeni armed forces managed to target the oil tanker Amzan, belonging to the Saudi enemy, in the northern Red Sea off the coast of Yanbu using a ballistic missile. The strike was precise and direct by the grace of Allah, leading to a fire on the vessel and causing several other ships in the area to flee.
The Houthis further announced that they had attacked Yemeni tribes that are backed by Saudi Arabia, insisting a high toll of casualties. Nevertheless, TV7 could not immediately corroborate those claims. Meanwhile, the United Nations has once again called for restraint and an end to Houthi hostilities against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
We are deeply concerned by reports of attacks by the Houthis against targets in Saudi Arabia. Such attacks risk furthering entangling Yemen in the wider regional confrontation at a time where, as we all know, the region is already facing intense pressure and regional trade and energy flows are already under severe strain. Attacks and threats against shipping must also stop, and freedom of navigation in both the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden must be upheld. We again call on the parties to respect their obligations to protect civilian infrastructure. Through de-escalation, they need to prioritize Yemen's own national interests and the interests of its people. The Special Envoy, Hans Grunberg, has stressed this imperative in all his engagements with the parties.
Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News, which is made possible by the generosity of our viewers. If you're blessed by our productions and would like to help support TV7 Israel, which operates as a non-profit, you can donate via our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. Please keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. I'm Jonathan Essen, wishing you an Erev Mevorach, and God willing, until our next update, Shalom from Jerusalem.